The United States has always, and it's not just the United States, it's the Protestant nominalist ethic, just assumes Christian ethics. It always has, and it always will. This is such an un-Christian thing to do, but like to just shame, like what happened to them without sin? I mean, like, to be fair, I do think that's f***ed up. Like, I do think that's f***ed up, and Destiny shouldn't have said it. But I'm not standing in judgment of Destiny just because, like, Destiny's just sort of firing back. That's the crack. But he is wrong. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode, another stream, Perspective Philosophy stream. I keep doing this. I'm really terrible at introducing this stuff, but today we are going to be reviewing the showdown between Destiny and Milo, and I've heard this is a great spectacle. I've seen a little bit of it, like a little bit of clips that people have sent us and stuff, and it just seems to be an absolute disaster. So I can't wait for this. This is going to be brilliant. So if anyone doesn't know who these participants are, but somehow have managed to find my tiny channel, Milo Yiannopoulos was a really big figure back around 2015, 2016, really around the time of the sort of, feminist gets owned period in which, the right-wing reaction towards sort of left counterculture really, fell in its stride back when Blair White and, it was like Blair White, some black guy. Hunter Avalon was on the right, I think, at the time. It was a very different. People like Ahmad Skeptic were really big channels responding to this stuff. And Milo was like king of the debate scene. To give him his credit, Milo Yiannopoulos used to be one of the most formidable debaters I have ever seen. And one of my philosophy professors even said that, he said, say what you want about the guy, but he is a formidable debater. And, a fierce debater, I think his words were. And it was true. He was an incredible debater. Fast forward, he got cancelled for, defending, I think, his own abuse. I think he was abused by a priest. And he defended it. He was sexually abused, I think, as a teenager. He was underage by a priest, and he defended it, and so he got known as a paedophile apologist, which I think is a little bit tragic, given that you would probably expect that kind of behavior from victims. Victims often try to reframe situations to make themselves not victims anymore. But still, obviously, his words were unacceptable. And so he the right really didn't like that. So his audience got really pushed back on him, and he sort of diminished into nothingness. And from what I'm aware, he became like anti-gay, went through like gay conversion, divorced his husband, and really went on a downward spiral. And obviously, I hope everyone on this channel probably knows who Destiny is. Destiny's a very famous political streamer, or rather, he's a gamer. And a politics streamer who still goes on today. He's been doing this for many years and gets many thousands of viewers. So this is supposed to be really, this could have been for Milo a comeback stream in which he showed his intellectual prowess, hopefully regained some of his old credulity and his credibility, and that would have been interesting. But from what I've seen, that's not what happens. And what is in fact going to happen is an absolute meltdown. So we're going to sit back and relax and watch this absolutely deteriorate. Oh yeah, actually that's a good point. Yeah, I was actually going to speak with Milo about 2 years ago. It was about 2 years ago now, wasn't it? Yeah, so about 2 years ago, I actually reached out to Milo and said I wanted to debate him. And I think it was on Christianity and homosexuality or something along those lines, because he was going through his anti-gay sort of conversion thing. And I wanted to make the argument that, you could be a Christian and not hate gay people really, or have to expect conversion, or whether gay conversion was a good thing. And essentially talk to him about this. And he actually agreed, but he only agreed that we could do it if we did it on his platform, which at the time was a website behind a paywall. Excuse me. And, no YouTube or anything like that. So it'd be completely private. He'd have full control over it. And I said, well, look, I want to publish this as well. And they never got back to us. Like, they wouldn't get back to us after I said I wanted to publish it. So we wanted complete control over it. But he had agreed to have a discussion with us. So it's actually really sad that I didn't get to do that. But, you know, maybe we can do it again in the future. But we're gonna get into it. We're gonna get into this perhaps a very, at least it's going to be a great spectacle of a debate, even if the content of the debate is lacking. So yeah. Thank you very much. Meta. I really appreciate that. Is this from Norway as well? That's Norwegian krona, right? Like, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Appreciate that Norwegian love. Okay, so right, here we are. We have Milo Yiannopoulos versus Destiny full debate. So the previous uploads that I'm aware of haven't been the full debate, and this has only been up for 19 hours. So let's get going with this.
Name one.
The University of Texas.
Okay, so
We didn't think you'd actually have an example.
I have a list.
they agree on the color of the sky.
Right.
Well, the first,
but answered
but
my
the first,
question.
but I think you just made that up. If you didn't, please tell us what church it is, because that's not Catholic teaching.
Sure.
That'd be
One of the
closed
pairs
down.
I went to was
Did you say you're not supposed to wear rosaries?
as a
Have you
as
never?
a
Have you
Catholic?
never been to Italy?
No, but I was a Catholic
No, you
for
haven't.
like
Okay.
16 years, and wearing a rosary was
very
a
good.
big no-no. We got in big trouble in school when we did that. But
No, you can't. I mean, I'm a Catholic. You can't wear a rosary. It's not something that's like a forbidden like thing. You can wear rosaries. It's not like you don't wear rosary. Like, I think that usually rosary. It depends on like the way that you've been taught. Usually rosaries are, like it doesn't have to be an act of penance, but it's often you say your rosary for an act of penance, or you may say it for simply just in order to like a sort of prayer session. You might go through like part of the rosary. You might only see the glory be to the Father, things like that, like different kind of patterns, and it's really just a way to kind of pray. But I don't think there's anything wrong with wearing rosaries. I've never, you just can't disrespect it. Yeah, I agree. Okay, you're Irish, so you should know. Like I used to wear a rosary to school. And one of my Catholic teachers, at Catholic school was like, what are you wearing girly beads for? And then like one of the students, this was my PE teacher, one of the students were like, you can't say that to him. This is a Catholic school. But yeah, you definitely can wear a rosary.
The answer to your question is race.
the funniest thing is I actually just made that up. I was seeing if
Yeah, not wear it as jewelry. It's not like a fashion statement. It's supposed to be like an article of faith. So maybe that's what he means.
he would actually try to talk his way through that, but I totally made that up. Thanks, Milo. We're not getting rid of cell phones. We're not putting women back in the kitchen. We're not getting rid of birth control. The internet's not going anywhere. We're not locking down our borders. We live in a world today that is as much different from 1980 as 1980 was from the 1200s that, Milo's so obsessed with. We need better conversations with people, better policies that we can advocate for, better things that we can talk about to move our people forward, rather than having people endlessly fracture and atomize themselves.
The question we're going to be answering today is, should Christian nationalism be the dominant governing ideology of America? We will have 10 minutes each of...
It didn't break. I might have broke his school's dress code. Yeah, that might be it. I was going to say it didn't break my school's dress code. But I would be surprised if Catholic school was like, you're not allowed to wear articles of faith. I don't know. Maybe it might just be like, it might be like the thing is, Catholicism is a huge church. And, when we say Catholic, it's like, we say we often refer to it as because it is one church, but it is absolutely massive. It's like nearly I think it's 1.5 billion people in the Catholic Church. So it's like there's a lot of differences between churches. So for example, where I come from, he's probably going to think the Catholic Church isn't okay with homosexuality, but where I come from, the run I think it's called Proud Catholics, where it's LGBT group for Catholics. And with it being the idea of it's not about being ashamed of being homosexual and not going against homosexuality. So it's not like the Catholic Church is this sort of rigid sort of doctrinal system. Anyway, there are variations between various dioceses.
Prepared opening statements, and then each of you guys will be able to go through 5 minutes of rebuttals each, and then I will ask 2 questions for each of you, and we'll rotate between you guys. You'll each have 5 minutes to answer the question.
Sorry, someone's hammering.
directed towards you, and the other person will have 3 minutes to.
I think someone's hammering. All right, I was just checking that it was in my house. Okay.
To respond, and then we will have a 30-minute Q&A and crossfire where you guys will have questions from the audience, and you will also then be allowed to sort of go back and forth between the two of you, so you can kind of have fun with it. It'll be a complete free-for-all. So after that, we'll go for 5 minutes each for closings.
Deliveroo presents.
Oh, sorry,
Decision.
guys. I need to get YouTube Premium. I'm the worst for this.
You guys are allowed to have prepared openings, and I will give you guys hand signals throughout so that we're all on time and so that everything is running smoothly. So let's get started with the openings. It will be 10 minutes each, and we are going to start with Milo.
Is that indigo?
My hair?
Yes.
We call it blue over here.
Okay. I have to give you some credit for having the cojones to show up in Tennessee barely a month after the bullet-ridden bodies of children have been buried.
Whoa. Whoa. What are you doing, man? Don't start like this. What?
As a sort of representative for a culture that did it.
Is he? I've never heard Destiny be okay with people shooting kids. Like this is some revelations.
And offering anything but condolences and sympathy.
I mean, we must be like 20 seconds into his opening statements, and he's basically accused Destiny of being like a child murder apologist. I mean, that's not good faith, man. That's bad.
I think it's disgusting.
Why?
I think it's shameful. How dare you? How dare you show up here offering anything but sympathy? Because, I think...
This is a politics debate, right? It's supposed to be nothing to do, like, from what I'm aware, this is supposed to be nothing to do about the shooting that occurred. Why would you even use that as as ammunition in a politics debate? That's the disrespectful. That's the disrespect. That's the person that's being disrespectful here. Like the person that's taken what is an awful, what is a tragedy, and using it as like political ammunition against an opponent that isn't even arguing about this topic. Like, it's not like they're talking about maybe it's even gun control, or they're talking about, the kids involved, or like an ideology around mass shooting, right? Like, this is about politics. That is vile. That is vile.
I should stand or something. We're familiar with what happened in Tennessee. We're less familiar with the reasons why.
Why is he squinting so much?
But the reason was that at any given time in society, there are about 20% of people who are just nuts. And those people will glom on to whatever the fad is for people who are nuts. So the current nuts is tragic. You can see in the social trends when you plot anorexia and bulimia, which was the big thing when I was growing up, against the new nuts. That there's basically about 1 in 5 people who are just not really all there and will kind of do whatever. But when you hand those people, those unstable and dangerous people, a victimhood script, when you give them a license to commit violence in the name of their supposed identities, instead of giving them the treatment and the love and the prayers that they need, you turn those people into killers.
So he's saying that because trans people are being treated as essentially, like they're being given like a victim complex, he's saying that this is essentially what's causing school shootings, is this. Like Like, I don't understand. I mean, it's sort of strange. Yeah, he is slurring, isn't he? He's really slurring. Like, there's something like this. Like, to be fair, I remember like even a couple of years ago, he was really on a downward spiral, and he was kind of coming across a bit like this. So it doesn't seem like it's just such a shift from what he used to be, which was a very cogent, like coherent speaker. Like, but yeah, like so he's accusing what, like a ideology, like he's saying that essentially trans people are mentally ill, and essentially they're being provoked by the sort of liberal, maybe like a liberal narrative, which is essentially fueling their mental illness rather than giving them treatment. That's not. I mean, like, to be honest, isn't liberalism like a lot of liberalism is about love? I'm not saying liberalism in general, but like a lot of the sort of left or what call for love and acceptance of them having mental illness, in the sense that, you know, that's why you see it as gender dysphoria. You know, you want to give them treatment, you want to sort of aid them in with the problems they're having. I do think that a lot of the problems aren't being addressed, like the underlying causes of the problems aren't being addressed socially. Like, why are so many people feeling dysphoric? Why are they not feeling okay with their identities? And I think that we should actually look more towards what the status quo has perpetuated in terms of how we conceive of ourselves in general. But then I don't think anyone on the left is okay with people taking up guns and killing children, really. I mean, for the most part, like the average American, right or left, can agree that the murder of children in the name of some sort of perverted ideology is wrong, right? Like, yeah.
You turn those people into time bombs. And there used to be something in America that would...
He's drunk. I wouldn't be surprised. Like, you know, this is actually, I was about to say, like, reminds me of, like, you know what, if I've been really hungover, or if I've had a drink and I'm trying to do philosophy, I'm really having to think.
protect against that. It was Christianity. I think it's shameful that anybody would show up so soon after a tragedy caused by the kind of ideologies that you support, and do anything but offer sympathy and condolences and celebrate the ideology that has protected us against this sort of thing for so long.
I just want to point out, how would he know that Destiny's not going to be, I am incredibly sorry for your loss, the loss of the community, the loss. You know, he could have his opening statement could have been that, but it's like he hasn't spoke yet, man. So how would he know? Like, and to say that he's, like, you know, defending the ideology which caused it. So we're saying that all of the left are responsible for the ideology that caused the school shooting or something. And like Destiny with his liberalism is essentially personally accountable, or is at least partially defending school shooters. That's madness. That's like saying that the right are responsible for that guy that shot up kids in Norway. What was he called? Breivik? Like, do we look towards like the average conservative and go, how can you even possibly talk about school shootings after, or even go into a politics debate after the horrors that happened in Norway? Or, you know, you'd be like, well, no, that's like, of course the average conservative is like, wow, that's a monster. Oh, managed to...
I have with me.
Whoa.
It's outside the scope of our evening this evening to prove or disprove the truth of Christianity or Christ or whatever. But I'll make a few points. There is no America without Christ. And the reason for that
Christ Erica.
is that this is an intrinsically and fundamentally Christian nationalist country, by which we mean it's built into the architecture of the nation. There's no getting away from it.
I mean, I do think Christianity is actually built into the United States. Even in liberalism in general, I think the left wing perpetuate the same sort of Christian doctrines, even if it isn't necessarily Christian in name. It still has a lot of Christianity in it. But to say that nationalism is sort of built into the United States, is it? I'm not sure about that.
You can lie about it. You can pridefully claim that, you know, you can be good people without Christ. You can't. You're just inheriting a system of good and evil from the culture in which you grew up.
I think there are good people who aren't Christian, and Christ said, you will be seen as, you'll be known to be my followers. I think when you act in love, I'm paraphrasing, but it's like you will be known as my followers when you are essentially loving. That's how Christians are identified. Like the Christian ethic is love thy neighbor, essentially. And I think that you can find non-Christians who perpetuate the same sort of ethical structure where it is about love, and they are good people. I think that's very, very dogmatic to say like you can't be a good person and not a Christian.
Which accords with the natural law. America was founded, as Adams told us, with a constitution that was wholly unsuited to the governance of anyone but a moral and religious people. And when he said religious, he meant Christian, although he himself was wandered through various different kinds of heresy. What Adams said was that this country that its founding documents, that its founding architecture, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, were wholly and fundamentally unsuited to the governance of anything but a moral and religious people. Do you think that America is comprised of a moral and religious people today? Obviously it is not.
It's kind of weird that he says moral and religious if you can't be religious without being moral. It seems like he could have just said religious, and he's almost said religious twice, hasn't he? We should tell him that the guy was clearly being redundant when he said that.
And what he meant specifically was Christianity, because the way that America is set up outsources morality to Christianity. And without it...
I think that is actually true. The United States has always, and it's not just the United States, it's the Protestant nominalist ethic, just assumes Christian ethics. It always has, and it always will. It just assumes that Christian ethics is a foregone conclusion, that you don't need a living tradition to understand it, that you gain it through direct revelation from reading the gospel. And from that point, all you need to care about now is power, the cultural mandate. And that you can actually see in the Protestant reformers who essentially established the United States, which established liberalism and then established the United States, which is essentially this idea that, what is good and bad is very easily achieved. It's almost gained through intuition. It's not something that you have to really work towards contemplating and understanding, which is why, it's like, in the in the Declaration of Independence, where it's like we take these truths to be self-evident, and it goes on to talk about your God-given rights, right? And the United States is very much based upon that. When you start really like questioning what is a right in terms of the American system, something like Roe versus Wade, you start to poke holes into the sort of foundation, or the sort of axiomatic foundation of the United States, where you're asking it to essentially explain and give reasons for what it takes to be a right, which is why you get so much fighting in the United States, where you have essentially, one side saying education is a right, while the other side says it's not, and you're actually stepping on my right for private property or something like that. So it is, to be fair, I think that he's not wrong in this, and I think the United States does and has always presupposed a Christian ethic. That is genuinely true. It might be, people might see it that way now, but that's just because it presupposes a liberal Christian ethic, and in that liberalism in reality is really just a logical progression from Christianity. It's just another level of Christianity that is, well, not Christianity, but another ideology perpetuated from a Christian foundation that was the result of Protestant reformist thinkers, which is why everyone's an atom, an individual, a unit, and sort of collectively working together in terms of a social contract. And it comes from what we can see as maybe a Calvinist background in terms of Thomas Hobbes, or maybe not so doctrinal in terms of John Locke, but still religious. John Locke saying that you will see the evidence of God simply through basic reason. So when you look towards the foundations of the United States, yes, certainly does presuppose a sort of Protestant Christian ethic.
It doesn't work, because jury trials don't work when people vote with race instead of conscience and truth. a society doesn't work when people don't obey contracts, don't obey their word when they're.
I mean, the thing is that there was racism when Christianity was still the dominant ideology of the United States, right?
Oath breakers. The architecture of America rests fundamentally on a bedrock of Christianity, without which the entire thing falls apart. And that's exactly what's happening. And you don't have to take my word for it. You don't even have to take Adams's word for it. But one of...
I actually think he's right. I actually think he's right on that. I think part and parcel... And I'm not saying that, the United States needs to embrace its cultural heritage in order to, I think the problem is that the reason it got in this situation in the first place is because it was... And I think, Hegel sort of talks about this, is this kind of unfounded universalism, right? And it was a very restrictive control and ideology which people rebelled against and became hedonistic. But in that, so it goes from this sort of universalist ethic to this sort of particularist, nominalist sort of conception of good, where it's actually just sort of devolved to the individual's good rather than the universal good that was presupposed to be self-evident or found through revelation, right? And I think that the death of the ethical sort of basis or the ethical communities that we see in the West have largely led to a degradation of or sort of moral thinking. And you can see this online. You start talking to people in the sort of moral anti-realists and stuff, and they'll start, people justify some mad stuff. You might get someone like Vorsh saying, if, he would farm and eat people if it, or you might get someone like Demon Mama who's like, I would eat people if they're in the supermarket or something like that, rather than actually confront the inadequacies in their own doctrine, right? And this is a sort of atypical issue, not because of just Christianity going away. It's just that our ethical communities or institutions were housed within the church. And what was, whether you're a Christian or not, I hope we can all agree that the ethic, we kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Like there was this rejection of unjustified authority within the church, but it threw away the good that was housed in the church as well. But yeah, this is I do think that's led to a degradation in the United States where you get these conflicting rationalities now. And it's unsurprising. And I think a great thinker for this is Alistair McIntyre, when he talks about the rival modes of rationality which are, appearing today are leading to an incommensurability, meaning people cannot speak to each other in terms of ethics, where you get like the sort of North versus South, or the Republican versus Democrat, in terms of the way that they're thinking morally. They're rationally incommensurable because they haven't got the same foundations. And I do think that is actually something true that I think Milo's actually touching on here. Unfortunately, I don't really think that it's coming from a place in which he's going to argue that any reasonable solutions other than essentially go back to tradition, which isn't really going to solve the problem, because all you're going to do is perpetuate the same issues and it'll happen again. It's not as if, like, for example, it's like with the Protestant Reformation. I don't want the Catholic Church to go back to the way it was when the Protestant reformers rejected the Catholic Church, because a lot of the reasons why they rejected the Catholic Church were legitimate. There was a lot of legitimate issues with the Catholic Church at the time. And I think that rejection led to a progression in the Catholic Church. Likewise, I think just falling back into sort of abstract tradition, it's a coping mechanism. And if you do that, you aren't going to hit that philosophical foundation, which is going to free you. Well, thank you very much. Oh, thanks. Thank you, sweetie. Is actually going to lead to a free and fair and just society. You're actually just going to end up with a one-sidedness, which is going to become essentially, it's going to constrain the freedom of individuals, which I think you can see in someone like Milo here, where he's like actually having to reject himself, essentially go through gay conversion therapy, and then, essentially lead a life which is, it seems that it's not doing him any good, because he might be very well drunk on stage.
Your own Supreme Court justices, somebody who was famously left-wing, Rehnquist, I think it was. Can't bother to look it up, but he said that everything in America presupposes the legal system, the social system, the government. Everything in America presupposes the existence of the Judeo-Christian God.
Yeah, probably
Without that, it all comes tumbling down. And without that, it is coming tumbling down. And without that, we're not able to give people who have terrible sicknesses and weaknesses and defects the help that they need. Instead, we hand them victimhood scripts and they shoot up schools.
I mean, this is the thing. Like, why does he think that this wouldn't happen within the same Christian ideology? If we look, like, if we look at the way that the right, the very right-wing Christian ideology that pre-existed this, like, if anything, it was very cold and uncaring about certain people. Like, the Protestant ethic was already quite individualistic. Don't get me wrong, charity holds importance to Protestants and stuff, but there was never this universal moral responsibility that I think, for example, we would see as, like, in terms of, like, Catholics, like, the Catholic conception of private property really starts to begin after the point of need. So, like, if someone needs something, you should be giving them what they need to survive, so that people can live a decent and a decent, fair, and just existence. And if you try to say, well, no, my property rights are essentially contrary to that, it doesn't work in Catholicism, because essentially property rights in themselves are reflective of a universal human right, and it's reflective of a universal substance, because it's a universalism. But the very nominalist particularism in Protestantism led to a kind of, like, I have a negative right. And this is the sort of liberalism that was, I don't owe you anything other than to not trespass upon you. And then maybe I owe God, and I need to, devote myself to charity somewhat. But, like, a lot of that led to a very unsympathetic society. I don't think American society is famous for caring for its ill and lame and sick and just the disabled in general. It's not really famous for being a compassionate, caring society. Even when it was Christian, it's never been famous for being a really caring society. And I think it's funny, because I think the liberals that he's arguing against traditionally are probably the descendants of the Christians who were calling for greater amounts of universalism and the consideration of the sick and the ill from a Christian doctrinal standpoint. It just so happens that they're largely secular now.
Shoot up churches, whether they are young white guys on antidepressants, or whether they're transgender people who are told that it's white Christians are responsible for all of their miseries. It is Christianity that keeps us nice to each other, that keeps us being good to one another. And
I think that's very bold. Like, it's not just Christianity that keeps us, it's love. And I think that, you can get unloving Christians, and you see that in, for example, in St. Augustine, when he talks about how, just because you're a member of the church, it doesn't mean that you'll go to the kingdom of heaven, or you'll go to the city of God. You could be essentially a member of the Catholic Church, but you'll still go to hell because you're not acting in accordance with the ethic.
If you toss it out, as happened in 1776 here, you have a really big problem on your hands, because, and I'm going to say something very radical and difficult to say in Tennessee of all places, there are freedoms afforded to Americans that are too radical and too great and too daring without the insulation of Christianity.
I actually 100% agree with that. I think that the reason that America does, it's not Christianity necessarily, but a strong ethical basis, right? Like, you need to presuppose for a lot of the freedoms that Americans are given, especially like the right to bear arms, that these people are going to act in accordance with the law. They're essentially going to concord with the law, that they're going to be rational moral agents, and they're not going to essentially, it presupposes a shared ethical life. And I think that shared ethical life is in crisis.
The First and Second Amendments don't work unless everyone's Christian. They don't work, and they're not working. They're not functioning. You can't give crazy atheists guns.
I mean, you shouldn't give crazy Christians guns either, right? Like, it's like the fact that you shouldn't give, I mean, the point is how much you can trust each other. And I think, to be entirely honest with you, I make a joke. I'm like, I barely trust people to drive a car. And I think that the reality is that you do need a considerable amount of trust to allow for greater amounts of freedoms. My God, I'm terrible for doing that.
You can't let shameless liars say whatever they want about other people in public without consequence. There's a sort of...
The thing is that this is very, like, for someone, like, this is a very, like, don't get me wrong, like, I mean, I would agree, but you get shameless lying Christians, right? Like, unfortunately, we're not all good people. As much as I'd really like it to be the case that we are all good people, like, you get some really absolute, like, horrible Christians. Remember, like, the Italian mafia was, like, really big upon being Catholic at times, but it's more of, like, a social status thing. They're actual living up to, like, they're not actually living up to the Catholic doctrine, right? Like, they're managing to justify somehow beating people with bats, shaking down shops, killing people,
Sort of unwritten rule that sits behind everything in America. And it is that these are all the things you get to do because we know that you can handle it. We know that you can be trusted with this because you love God, because you respect life, because you won't take other people's lives, because you'll keep your word. Without that, the First and Second Amendments become a sort of license to abuse one another or to kill one another. They become a license to lie.
I mean, I don't think. I mean, I think he's probably. I see what he's getting at, right? He's saying, like, the unbridled freedom, presupposes moral responsibility, and a morally responsible actor. If anything, I think this gives more power to the sort of left position where it's like, okay, so I need to be able to sort of. You need to indicate to me that you are morally responsible before you can sort of act in accordance with, like, I don't know, like, have a gun. Maybe you need a gun license or something like that, which I think the right would go crazy about. So, like, I don't know where he's necessarily going with this. It's like, and I think he's very upset because I think he's obviously faced a lot of slander and a lot of problems. And he's been cancelled, right? Like, and in many ways he's been cancelled because of his victimhood, which probably makes him feel awful. But he did say some really shady stuff as well, and maybe he did need to be called out for that. So I think this is in many ways a kind of cope. Like, if you look at his face right now, he looks so genuinely angry, man. Like, this is rage, and, like, he's reflecting on something. Like, it's almost like he's having, like, a prophetic vision, right? And I think that something else is shining through here. I don't know if anyone else sees that. Like something else, like, totally unrelated to the debate is definitely coming through.
They become a license to murder. They become too much freedom.
The thing is that it's not too much freedom. It's a very, like, the point of freedom is that it is ethical in the first place. It's rational self-determination, right? And if you essentially allow for unbridled actions, then that's not rational self-determination. It can actually be unfreedom. You're getting too much of what you want, which is why we need to limit ourselves to some degree. Now, that would be a fair point, but that doesn't presuppose Christianity.
Because there is such a thing. And
he is also hammered, but I think that, like, maybe that's leading them to have this sort of emotional moment,
without an underpinning moral architecture, this country doesn't work. And it's not working. And since this country has fallen away from God, the Christian God, this country has begun to fall apart. And that's why all of this terrible shit is happening. That's why all the awful stuff on TV is going on. It's why you can no longer trust people to keep their words if you don't know them. It's why everybody keeps voting with their skin color or their sexuality or gender or whatever bollocks it is today.
I mean, I think there is a lot of. I think the thing is that I think he's kind of in an unintelligent way picking up on a genuine problem, which is that people are essentially becoming partisans of like hegemonic groups, which are only exist and counteract each other. They're both wrong. They both know why each other are wrong, but they don't accept they're wrong internally. And so all they do is battle to the death, basically. And that's the United States' political system. And they're torn apart in terms of these like political ideologies and disunified. And there is this disunity in the United States, largely because there's no dominant ideology that's shared amongst its inhabitants. So they don't agree on things like right and wrong. There's no sort of universal moral basis. And he's touched on that in a way that I think is genuinely correct. He's just not given a good example of why it has to be Christianity, or why it couldn't, especially why it needs to be nationalistic. It could be globalist. If anything, it points towards the need for global unity in this respect, and perhaps unless we have global unity, it would never perfectly actualize. You can see in the socialists, like the Situationists International, there'll never be a revolution unless it's global kind of thing. But in many ways, what if it's a revelation? What if it's an ethical revelation that, particular moral groups cannot essentially sustain themselves unless they enter into a global community? I mean, I'm a Catholic, so maybe I'm biased in this, and I'm looking for this sort of universal ethical community, which I think is a very good thing. But I do think that maybe he's touching on something correct there, but it doesn't presuppose Christianity necessarily, and it doesn't presuppose nationalism.
Because they're not unified under Christ, because they're not one under Christ, because they're not brothers and sisters in Christ.
My brother in Christ.
It doesn't matter if you agree with the literal truth of Christianity or not. The founders did, and they made a country for people who did. And if you don't agree with that, or you don't like God, or you don't see...
The thing is that the twisted thing here is that you have to obey this sort of the intentions of the founders, this is a weirdly American take, right? Where it's like, what did the founders want? No, what is the Constitution of the United States? The founders are a bunch of people reading the room, right? They're reading the will of the people. They aren't the will of the people. I don't give a shit what Thomas Jefferson would want now. What do the American people want? Which is like, we the people. Like, that's why it starts with we the people, not like me, Big George, Jeff, like Thomas, like, what do we want? Like, it's not like that. It's we the people. It's the unity of the will of the people. That's the Constitution of the state, which is why they're rebelling, because they're saying, like, look, you're going against the Constitution. This is breaching our Constitution. And I think as well, this idea that, you say that this state is Christian, and it's for Christians. I think the point of Christianity, and it's very much what separates us from other religions, which are more fundamentalist and more dogmatic, is that we don't punish apostatism, right? We if any, it's like the prodigal son. We will celebrate your return. It's not about if you lose your faith, it's like the trials of Job. You can lose your faith. You're being tested. You're not going to be punished for losing it. You're going to be rewarded for regaining it. And that's the point of Christianity. You can only truly become Christian if you become Christian through your own will and not through a coercive force. Like, I don't want people to convert to Christianity because they're scared of some sort of political, like, pushback. That's weird.
Why too much freedom is leading us all to hate and kill each other. And you don't appreciate that we should not only restore Christianity in culture, but require it in public life.
That's fundamentally un-Christian. If you do not choose Christ in your own heart, you are not a Christian. This is coercion. You can't coerce people to be a Christian. Like, that's not how it works. You can't force people to be a Christian.
You should go to Canada. You should go somewhere else where there's a moral architecture built into the law. But here, doesn't work without God. And when you don't have him, when instead people replace prayer and the rituals of the church with antidepressants, with
Christians don't get depressed.
compound interest, with games and drink and drugs and fornication, kind of thing he does with his wife.
He clearly doesn't know enough about other Catholics.
You know, offering her around town like she's common property.
Whoa, man. You can't be doing that. That's wrong. Why is he making this personal? Why? Like, the thing is, you know, like, this is such an un-Christian thing to do, but, like, to just shame, like, what happened to them without sin? You know what I mean? Instead, you're sitting there with your podium, shaming everyone with you and your whole wife or some shit. It's like, what the fuck?
America doesn't work when we behave that way, because we'll all just end up murdering each other. That's all.
Destiny, you have 10 minutes.
Why?
This is terrible.
It's not every day I'm the progressive. Oh, what? Here? Yeah? Oh, nice. Okay. I'm not used to arguing for more freedoms against conservatives on stage, but I guess that's where we're at right now with the conservative movement, or whatever part of the conservative movement this is. Today, we've got viewers gathered from all across the world tuning in to a debate between me and Milo, where Milo is going to argue that we should turn the USA into an isolated, authoritarian, zealously religious country. I think that technology is the Pandora's box that has changed this country and this world forever, and I don't think we're ever going back to the days of public squares and mail service by horse. Cultural exchange is happening, whether you like it or not, quite literally at the speed of light. Even right now, potentially hundreds of thousands or even millions of people around the world are listening to me and Milo have this debate. The only way to stop this type of cultural exchange is through the militant authoritarianism that Milo is talking about on this stage.
I really think that, like, you see, like, obviously Destiny's far more prepared. He's more, like, rhetorically capable here. But, like, you know, if it's kind of sad, because I think Milo in his sort of prime rhetorically was really good at being able to go off script, and he clearly has the high verbal IQ and stuff. And I think that would have made it for a really strong opening if he was still the Milo he once was. But because he's such a shadow of his former self, like, he would have been so much better off if he had just done something like this. If he was sober, basically. Yeah,
that might be through his being against the First Amendment, that might be against his taking away of the Second Amendment, and that might be through the institution of a state religion.
I think it is funny, actually. I think there's something to be said, actually, in the sense that the American Constitution even presupposes Christianity in the fact that it necessitates freedom of religion. And I think it certainly could argue that it is inherently un-Christian to go against the freedom of religion, because that is what the founders intended, which is why it's there. So in many ways, you could just 180 his position, just say you're the one trying to essentially go against the freedoms in which the founders had intended, which were Christian freedoms, which we can see are necessary, which you proclaim are necessary for the country. So what is it? Should we have freedom of religion or shouldn't we?
This means the destruction of our freedom of speech, our ability to produce media, satire, and comedy, and our ability to communicate openly on the social media platforms we've all unfortunately grown addicted to. After Milo gets his way and abolishes the First Amendment, is he going to be the one deciding who we can or cannot make fun of on Twitter? Is the world really going to return to how it was before birth control, before women had the right to work, before gay people were allowed to get married, before we were allowed the ability to freely worship whatever God we wanted, or abstain from worship altogether? I reckon that we cannot close Pandora's box. Christian nationalism, as it stands today, isn't even a coherent ideology. Its proponents will argue whether there's an ethnic component, whether one needs to be Catholic or not, and whether one needs to even be a Christian or a supporter at all in order to idolize somebody for a Christian nationalist ideology. How many more porn stars does Donald Trump need to work his way through behind his wife's back before Christian nationalists stop worshiping him as their savior? As small as Christian nationalism is as a movement, even with it being as small as it is, there is still endless infighting. Anyone who's taken a gander recently at Milo, Ali Alexander, or Fuentes' Telegram account can attest to that. And now, with an already fractured and fighting minority movement, some want to put even more restrictions, such as race, lineage, sexuality, LGBT status, or geography on who ought to be allowed to join their movement. The glory days of Christianity are largely over. While the number of worshippers have ebbed and flowed through time, it's impossible for us to return to where we came from.
I don't think that's the case. I think that sort of begs the question. I think in many ways, yes, we can't go back to the Christianity that we once had, but I don't think that shows that Christianity itself. I mean, remember that Christianity's changed a lot. I mean, it's been around for over 1,000, 1,500 years longer in terms of the Catholic Church, and it's just a single church has been around for that long. So to say that Christianity is largely over, considering it's the largest religion in the world, and okay, we have an increasingly secularizing society, but that doesn't mean that it's going to remain secular. I think that for one, that we tend to see this. We tend to see people come and go from whatever dominant ideology that they're given, with the sort of ebbing and flowing of their lives. They try to act in accordance with the ideology. They fail. They reject the ideology. They fail anyway, and then they go backwards and forwards. Typically, we see that. So to say that Christianity is over, no, I think that's a bit of a stretch. To say that Christianity cannot be the same as it was, back in the 1776, absolutely. I mean, you can't just go on a time machine and go back.
In 1999, almost 70% of Americans were part of a church, synagogue, or mosque. And just 20 years later, in 2020, according to Pew Research, that number has fallen to just 47%, a minority of the population for the first time in U.S. history. We need to be realistic about the coming years. We need to help our young men and women find purpose in the world and stop pretending like some Christian nationalism is the answer. We need to find ways to get our young people engaged with their friends, family, and their communities in ways that synergize with the technological explosion the entire world has experienced. If Christian nationalists want to continue to practice Christianity in America, then I say we let them. However, we should never allow them to take...
I think largely the Christian sort of nationalism is probably what's pushing people away. It's the fact that they keep trying to establish a dogmatic version of Christianity that is pushing people away from Christianity in the United States. It's like what turns people off is the fact that in order to be a Christian, apparently you've got to hate gay people, for example, or in order to be a Christian, you've got to believe that the earth was made in 7 days. And it's this, it is these sort of ludicrous positions that are making people turn away, where they're saying no, Christianity doesn't make sense. Of course, it's not representative of Christianity, but because it's representative of a specific kind of Christianity, and that's been seen to be the sort of it's the prolific version of Christianity. I think people are turned away from that, and so rather than even saying you do need to bring people together, maybe the best way to do that is to essentially not promote this nonsensical, arguably abhorrent ideology.
Take away our right not to do the same.
All right. We will now have 5 minutes of rebuttals from each of you guys. So we'll start with Milo. You have 5 minutes.
If the movement is... Thank you. If the movement, such as it is, I didn't realize there was one, but if Christian nationalism is not yet adequately defined, it's because nobody used it before 2 years ago, which it seems to me to be perfectly reasonable. Trump is not a religious leader in any sense, and you're making a classic mistake of people.
I don't know. People are worshipping him like a messiah. People do actually there is the weird Trump is like a godsend kind of. Some are memes, and I think some are legitimate political propaganda. There's people promoting. To be entirely honest with you, I think it shows that the unity of the church in politics is always going to happen, and you can't really divorce them. The fact that you get conservative churches promoting people to vote Trump, wear MAGA hats and all that sort of stuff while they're in church. The United States the United States really see that churches are incredibly divided in terms of political orientation. You get progressive LGBT churches, and you get super conservative anti-gay churches. This is a problem with the way in which well, to be honest, Protestantism views the way in which you create a church. A church is just a place you go and pray with others, and that, you know, the way in which you understand the Bible is largely up to reason independently, and so you end up with these massive fractures in terms of what counts and doesn't count as a church. That's why the Catholic Church, none of this like disunity could actually exist. In Orthodox, it really couldn't exist in this way. Only in Protestantism, because of the way in which they view human nature, is radically different. And it's I think you do see that like people do worship these sort of political icons. They've turned that churches into like sort of political propaganda staging areas. It's sickening, I have to be honest.
Who don't understand religion, don't understand God, and don't understand their own country, when you say, hold Trump up as a kind of moral example. Render unto Caesar. We don't expect that our presidents should be like Jesus, because they're not here to do Jesus' job. So, no. It's interesting you talk about women's rights. I mean, Christianity is the... Sorry, I mean... I just don't know how hard to go in, really. I mean, you're talking about the religion that gave women consent in marriage. You're talking about the religion that gave women the right to say no, that elevated them from chattel into human beings. You want to return women to chattel. You want women to be like your wife, passed around town.
Whoa! Why you were going back? Oh, no.
I'm sorry, but I'm not going to take moral lectures on the rights of women from somebody who treats supposedly their...
What? Why? The thing is, he was making an okay point to say, well, no, look, like Christianity is a doctrine which promotes fair and equal treatment of individuals. It was there at it was Christians who were talking about the abolition of slavery, and you could have pointed to the boycott movements and with Quakers. He could have showed that, Christians were there with the civil rights movements, and Martin Luther King himself was a reverend. None of that. No, we're just going to instead call his wife a slut, and she's getting passed around, and that's that. Oh my Lord.
A wife in what ought to be a holy sacrament as a communal sex toy.
Whoa, what? Oh my God. I mean, I don't think that he's actually like, this isn't like he's went into a town and like, passed Melina about like a communal sex toy, right? Oh God. Look, I'm pretty sure she gets consent in the sexual relationship she embarks upon. I really don't think, I think that like you're coming at this from a really strange angle. Oh my God.
Give me a break. Give me a break. I'm not going to take moral lectures from somebody who, for all intents and purposes, may as well have a fleshlight instead of a wife.
Whoa! Whoa, that's not cool, man. That's not cool. Nah, fuck. That is the least Christian thing ever. You would never... Jesus Christ himself associated with prostitutes. But here we have, holier than thou, self-righteous Milo Yiannopoulos telling this man that he's using his wife, like he's treating his wife like a communal sex toy and desecrating the sacrament of marriage. Oh my... Oh God. No one's going to take you seriously when you go on like this. It's not Christian, it's not forgiving, it's not loving, it's not caring. You don't represent any of the Christian virtues when you go on like this. And like nominally referring to Christianity, it does no good for your argument, because clearly it shows that you can't just be a Christian and also be moral, because you're demonstrating the inverse of, or the converse of that right now. Like you are showing that you can be a sinful, hateful, horrible individual who talks and degrades women and as a way to harm your political opponent. You will use this is a real fucking woman who has her own interests, her own life, has her own feelings and well-being that needs to be considered, and here you are using her as if she's some sort of political mechanism. If anyone's showing disrespect right now, it's Milo. Like, it's absolutely appalling how you can say and go, oh yeah, I care about women, you don't care about women because you're not a Christian, because you treat women like they're sex toys. By the way, your wife's a whore. I mean, like, what the fuck?
Who demeans and besmirches her honor.
But you are besmirching your woman's honor.
Who speaks about a woman who should be treated with the reverence and respect and love that we treat our own mothers with. Like she was something you could buy. Like she's something that just to get off with.
What is this is unhinged.
Passed around to other men while you watch.
Odd.
Flicking yourself off. So forgive me if I decline to take any lectures from you on women's bloody rights. As for gay rights, no thanks. I didn't want them when I was having sex with men, and I don't want them now.
This guy has lost his mind, hasn't he? That's the crack. He's drunk and he's going through a crisis. Who let him on stage, man? This is like exploitation. Like, I'm starting to just pity him. Where it's like, come on, who let Milo out the hospital? Like, you know, it's...
Catholicism and Islam are growing, in case you aren't familiar with the world outside these borders. And the reason for that is that everybody sees what a bloody mess we're all in, thanks to globalization, thanks to the information economy, thanks to the kinds of changes that he says are inexorable, because, like a lot of undereducated people, he doesn't have much of a grasp of the world before he was born. I think if you were to glance a little further back, whether it were to ancient Greece, or Rome, or the Holy Roman Empire, you would see plenty of examples in history, or even, dare I say it, the Weimar Republic. A little bit closer to our own era, in which an era of rampant sexual degeneracy was indeed replaced by some quite stern social rules.
He's not wrong with that. Like, I think that people do look towards sort of abstract, we'll say like religiosity or ideological coping mechanisms when they realize that hedonism fails. And so when your ethics fall apart, then people do turn to extremes, such as Christian nationalism, would be a good example. I mean, he's not wrong about that. And that is a risk, and I think that's what we are seeing in the United States today. So I think Milo's, like, he's picking up on things that are legitimate. Like, you know, he could have made a legitimate argument, not necessarily for Christian nationalism, but like, let's say why the United States should be more Christian, would have been a fair place to start. But instead, he has just insulted Destiny's wife a lot.
To put it mildly. History is replete with examples of what happens when the public gets sick of people like you fucking everything up, breaking everything apart, and destroying all the things that make society precious, that make relationships work. In fact, if you are to look back in history as far as Greece and Rome, you might say that history is really the story of how people like you, given undue influence and larger platforms than they deserve, continue.
I deserve it. You don't deserve the platform. I deserve the platform.
Continually express views that are so far outside of the mainstream and so out of step with what ordinary people think that you have to be regularly slaughtered and new governments have to be installed.
What the fuck? What the like this? You have to be, wait, this is the Christian, you have to be regularly slaughtered. This is supposed to be the representative of Christianity. What the we're supposed to be against war, you dunce. Like, this is like, I mean, this is hate. Like, we're not supposed to hate. No, man, you just can keep him. We're never taking this guy back.
And coups have to be engaged in just to keep people like you in line, because otherwise we'd all be dead. So I'm sorry, but I'm certainly.
Would we, if people like Destiny became more popular? I think, if anything, if people like Destiny were like more commonplace, what we'd find is that people, like maybe a lot more like World of Warcraft players, larger servers, you know, more people play, like, there's just like subscription to video games would just go through the roof. Sales of like Red Bull and Monster would be at an all-time high. Cheetos would be maybe like one of the most powerful corporations in the United States. I don't know.
I'm not going to take any kind of moral lectures from you on anything, but I've given you a few examples of why everything you just said is complete and absolute nonsense. But let me tell you, if your memory stretches back, and as you're at university, you're an educated person, it should be further than 1980. You absolutely can put it back in the box, and we must, and we should, because otherwise America is done.
All right.
I mean, he didn't actually say why. Like, the thing is that like he's pointing towards genuine issues, right? Like you know, perhaps the loss of religion is going to cause like political instability. It could cause issues, and I mean, just randomly saying that people need slaughtered somehow in there. Yeah, just slaughter thy neighbor. Absolute basket case, to be entirely honest with you. Yeah, just war, but like, you know, even when Augustine talks about a just war, for example, you know, it's to love thine enemy. You have to do it for the benefit of your enemy. Like, does this sound like for the benefit? Like, oh yeah, we just slaughter you to keep you in line. Like, it's fucking madness. Like, and the way that he's talking is incredibly hateful. Like, this is if anything exactly what Augustine would be against. It's a kind of gang mentality. And I think that the he never really actually gave an argument as to why Christianity should be adopted. Like I think that there's arguments that could be made there. I'm a Christian. I think that he's pointed towards genuine ethical issues in the United States that more capable and competent philosophers have done so themselves. But this is just, it's just being hate. And to be honest, I would even go so far as to say this is verbally abusive against Destiny. Like, there is like, just the, you know, like, you're talking about like having you need to have the trust in to have the First Amendment. You know, you need to be able to trust in order to have the freedoms for the United States, so that you don't abuse your freedom of speech and slur and slander, you know, others. And yet here he is, you know, essentially using, not only slandering the person he's on stage with, but he's essentially slandering a woman who's not even present in order to win over a crowd for, like, and the internet for like cheap points. If anyone is the whore here, it is Milo for attention. That is all I've learned from this.
Destiny, you have 5 minutes for your rebuttal.
I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to respond to. I think it's a little funny that apparently I'm so far outside of what people regularly think, despite the fact that I'm pretty sure I'm giving you a bigger audience than you've had in the past several years post your cancellation. But I see that this is what the dying throes, I guess, of an internet provocateur, as he self-described himself back when you were writing on the alt-right, then when you were writing on Trump. Now I guess you're not writing on guys anymore, because apparently you prayed away the gay. So whatever you're doing now. But I won't get into all that. I'll take.
I can't feel sorry for someone who, you know, he brought this on himself. Like, Destiny's going to have his life, and you know what? I'm going to love it. This is like he's started this.
The high road, despite the fact that you're one of the most obsessed with my wife's vagina gay guys I've ever seen in my entire life, which is very weird, but very strange. I'll kind of reiterate what I said before, I guess. I don't know how long we're going to do this, but yeah, I think that Christian nationalism is largely a joke. I guess you can kind of see that the figures that are proponents of Christian nationalism, like Christian nationalism, are largely jokes. They don't really have any serious positions. They just sit up here trying to provoke. They really have nothing to offer the public, nothing to offer the public discourse, nothing to offer the people that...
Obviously, Destiny's not really going into any of the arguments that he gave, but he never really fleshed out those arguments and instead just pointed towards issues that may or may not occur depending upon a sort of implied rather than fleshed out position.
That are, I guess, trying to join and leave these movements, because obviously, as we can see online, they are ever fracturing and ever infighting more and more every single day.
What Christians, American Christians, certainly. I think that's just the basis of American Christianity. Certainly Protestantism, it's so individualistic, especially, well, particularistic.
Yeah.
All right. We'll move on to the questions right now. The person who I will direct a question towards has 5
I mean, nothing has actually been said, right? Like, I really feel like I'm getting no real political sort of value from this. There's just been a lot of... This is a slanging match at this point, right? Like, this is what it's devolving
minutes to
into.
respond, and then the opponent has 3 minutes to respond to that. Then the first question is for Milo. As we know, Christianity has a lot of denominations, and even amongst your faith, Catholicism, there are lots of conflicting interpretations of the Bible, and out there.
Yes, they are. What do you mean? No, they're not. Like, of course there are. Like, there are like there are like I mean, a universal implies that it contains contraries, right? Which, like, for example, I have a heterodoxical view of Scripture. And like certainly, so for example, I'm not against homosexuality, right? I don't think that we should be against homosexuality. I don't agree with the sort of natural law thesis which promotes that position on. I think it's a mistaken conception of natural law. It's not the correct moral theory, right? So I don't think that that's correct, and that doesn't make me not Catholic. There are varieties of there's a lot of variation in the Catholic Church. Like, people have different beliefs, and we incorporate different beliefs in the Catholic Church. Like, we don't expect everyone to conform to the doctrinal, the sort of literal doctrinal, the doctrine of the institution, because that's how the institution's formed in the Catholic Church, through discourse, through reason, through debate. And Catholic Church is famously for like 1,000 years, like with the scholastics, really focused on theological debate, where if you read someone like like Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica, for example, it's a manual for debate, replying to objections to his position, implying like a variety of different things, whether, something like whether the passions existed in Eden or something like that, and some people say yes, some people say no, whether I don't know, like heaven is a physical place or just a spiritual place. Things like that. Like, these things are debated in Christianity all the time. Like, it's not like in Catholicism, it's not like there is one interpretation. Like, that is the least Catholic, the least Catholic way of being.
Differing opinions.
Because the word literally means universal. Like, there are definitely differing opinions.
How would you, in your Christian nationalist society, coexist with non-Catholics?
You don't have to. I mean. My patron saint, Louis IX, the only canonized king of France, says that he knows what's coming already. There must be Elijah. I've been warned about you. Said that it wasn't really proper to debate these kinds of things, and it's better to run somebody through with a sword than to.
What? What?
Than to hear them besmirch the faith or whatnot. But
why has he put a pencil in his mouth?
If you think that coexistence with Christians is such an onerous and dreadful burden, perhaps you might like to tell the Jews who.
Where we're going with this? Where are we going with this?
Seem to quite like it. In fact.
Okay. I thought he was going to say something about coexistence with the Jews there, and okay.
Jews and Christians, it seems to me, do best.
I mean, actually, that would be a point. Like, how is he going to coexist with the Jews in this? I guess he's not. He's already said that. So the Jews, they like to coexist with us, but we don't like to coexist with them, right? Like, what the fuck?
In the sort of situation that you have in the West with a Christian governing majority, and a Jewish minority, so that we don't all get too super serious and up ourselves. And we have some good new interpretations of Mendelssohn now and again. There aren't any conflicting interpretations of the Bible in Catholicism. There is only church teaching, and church teaching is eternal, unless some pope comes along and decides that even Francis hasn't done that he's going to rip it all up.
No, I mean, like, the point is that the Pope can, like, not just the Pope, but like the cardinals and so, like, the can vote to make changes. Like, that's like the Vatican councils made like definitive changes in terms of, like, we are a living tradition developing. Like, we are learning the Bible through time, learning the will of God. Like, it's not something that as we progress and we become more sophisticated, we are, in the words of Irenaeus, we are made in God's image to become in his likeness. Like, we don't just have the answers. Just why we care and debate and engage with these things. Like, Catholics are very much a group of people who want to, I think it was a recent video that described them as a group that wants to know everything about anything, or anything about everything, or everything about everything. And it's true, like, Catholics really care about reason and explanation. Like, we often get called too speculative, like, or as it we're going into the nitty gritty too much. So no, like, it's just not how Catholicism works. Like, it's just not. It's just not how we engage with each other. I know, it's just also like the like, it even say we even like have room for heterodoxy, like just not heresy. So, like, you couldn't deny, let's say, like, Jesus Christ as, like, essentially the Son of God and be a Catholic. But how you understand something like the ethics of gay marriage, or whether priests could have wives, like, that doesn't make you not a Catholic.
Coexisting with Christians is the easiest thing to do in the world. And I can't remember who gave this example, but if you heard footsteps, this is not my analogy, but if you heard footsteps coming up behind you in a dark alley at night, would you feel safer if you knew that it was Dylan Mulvaney or any church-going Christian?
I'd probably feel like, I mean, if we're putting any church-going Christian, yeah, I think there's a lot of church-going Christians that I would actually be much more, like, scared of than Dylan Mulvaney. Like, is that their name now? I don't even, like, I like the you know, like, I'm just not scared of them, really, for one. Like, I don't think they're violent, or, you know, like if I'm thinking of the same, like, you know, what if it's Kanye? Yeah, you know, but, like, I mean, like, there's a lot of church-going Christians. I mean, as the Catholic Church is very well aware of right now, there's a lot of priests who do bad things. There's people in the Catholic Church. Just because you are a Catholic, just because you go to church, doesn't mean you're a good person living by the moral law that exists within the church. Like, yeah, exactly. I had the same. I'm not gonna lie, that was me an intuition straight away. Like, I could take them in a fight. What are you talking about? There's some hench Christians. Like, yeah, exactly. But, like, no, I think obviously that's ridiculous. Like, there are some horrible Christians. But why do I keep doing that?
All right, for Destiny, you have 3 minutes now to respond.
Why did someone yell "good point, Vosh"? Like, that's so weird, man.
Can you read the prompt again?
Yeah, sure. As we know, Christianity has a lot of denominations. Even amongst your faith, Catholicism, Milo's faith, there are lots of conflicting interpretations of the Bible. How would your Christian nationalist society coexist with non-Catholics?
Well, I mean, the society that I advocate for is the one that exists today, where people are allowed to worship whatever religion they want. I think that right now, America is superior to a Christian nationalist version of it, because if two different people decide they want to worship two different versions of Christianity, they have the right to do that. Obviously, in Milo's world, I guess the non-Catholics even, I think, would get killed. I don't know how many, where the killing starts.
Deus Vult, everyone. Like, Deus Vult. The Catholics are coming back. No, come on, man. Like, this is ridiculous.
and stops for his version of Christian nationalism, or ethnically, I don't know where that starts or stops. I heard the run.
Who said we're going to kill anyone? I say we run them through with a sword. Oh, we're not going to kill them, though.
Through the sword thing, maybe.
We'll have to slaughter people like you, but we're not going to kill them, though.
Forgot what you said. I'm not sure what you were doing in the bathroom while we were waiting for you for 20 minutes here, but maybe it's affecting your memory a little bit. But yeah, I think in the United States, I think one of the reasons why the United States works as well as it does is because we've allowed so many different people to come here, worship in the way that we want, or worship in the way that they want, and we should continue to allow them to do so.
I think that the best response. I think Destiny should have showed an internal contradiction with saying it's just inherently unchristian to try and force church doctrine, especially for Protestants. Like, especially for Protestants, I think in some respects, because it depends on the Protestant sect, but like the idea of individual reason being necessary for revelation for Protestantism, it shows that it cannot be forced because I can't think for you. So there's no path to God without your reason. In the same way as I think in Christianity, in Catholicism, like it cannot be forced. Reason and revelation. Reason and faith like go hand in hand. You can't really push Christianity onto someone. They have to come to Christ with their own love. It is their own love which brings them to Christianity. That's why when people leave, we've got to be like, all right, goodbye, please come back. That's the, but like that would have been the best defense, I think.
40 minutes is a terribly long time to do a line of coke. I was late. I was a line of coke. I was late.
What's his name? Oh shit!
I was late for the ordinary reasons that people are late. I was at the hairdresser.
All right, Destiny.
I have the personality I have. Sort of stuck with it now.
Now your question, Destiny. You have 5 minutes to respond to this, and then I'll have 3 minutes to respond to that. Some would argue that a society without religion at its core would devolve into a nihilistic society, deprived of any meaning or purpose. How would you prevent in your society, non-Christian nationalist governing society, from devolving into a nihilistic, meaningless society?
I mean, there's an actual issue there, right? That I think Nietzsche pointed out. God is dead. We have killed him. Now the risk is nihilism. How we're going to deal with it? So I think there's an actual, legitimate philosophical question there. Like, regardless of whether you're a Christian or not, this is a problem. And I think it shows like an issue with how ideology is structured. What happens when we realize the how radical our freedom is, how truly radical our freedom is.
I think that you have to have something greater than yourself to live for. And I think religion is like a really easy package to give somebody that kind of solves for a lot of those problems. It gives you a nice guide for how to view the world. It gives you a nice guide for how to view your family. It gives you a nice guide for how to live an ethical life. And through that package, people feel like they have something greater than themselves to live for. I don't think it's impossible to have that thing without religion, but I think right now we're very politically fractured as a country, and it makes it really difficult for us to have those things. So for instance, there are certain topics that are hotly contested that I don't think should be. So for instance, all of us should be able to say we're proud to be Americans. That includes progressives, that includes BLM people, that includes people on the left, that includes anybody that might, however far left you go, you should be able to say that. That shouldn't be ground that we cede to people on the right. I think it's kind of a shame that if you see an American flag on somebody's car today, you basically know that they're a conservative because nobody on the left would put that on their car. I think that's an insane proposition. So I think that when we've gotten to this point to where we're so politically divided that people can't even feel proud of their country anymore, if you also take away religion from those people too, then they're kind of aimlessly, I guess.
Yeah, but you don't want to replace religion with patriotism because that is just terrible. You do not want a bunch of people who are like, do see the flag as a religious icon. I don't think that he's saying that. I don't think Destiny's saying that, but I just want to point out that is another risk. And I think that like the idea that the nation replaces God in terms of iconography, in terms of its place in heaven as a sort of sublime, sort of sublimity, or even like just a sort of teleological like goal, like an end point of your life. I think is not only risky but also misguided, like heavily misguided.
Wandering from Twitter to Facebook to YouTube to whatever, just endlessly shitting on each other with no common united purpose. So I think that one of the things we need to work on more than anything else is kind of healing some of the political fracture that exists in this country. I think it's good that we argue with each other, but it's not good that we are relentlessly banning people from every platform so that we're all kind of like gathering in different areas and we're not even able to have conversations with each other in the same reality anymore.
Just look at the societies that Christians build. I mean, earlier he says, oh, you get rid of the First Amendment, and there goes satire. Again, apparently a memory that doesn't stretch back before 1980. Because I think most of the best satirists were Christian Europeans, weren't they? And before that, they were pagans. And, we live in a very Hellenistic kind of a inheritance, and it was just complete and total bollocks.
I mean, why would... The thing is, though, like, I think there is something to be said that it would limit satire. Like, I don't know why. Like, I don't see why he doesn't understand that it's not simply about being Christian. Like, it's about having the freedom of expression and the freedom in order to engage. Certain freedoms are necessary if you even have like flourishing reason that would be necessary for comedy. Like.
And you've been doing a lot of complete and total bollocks, assigning positions to me that I don't hold, and saying, oh, he wants to murder everyone, he wants to kill all the blacks.
I mean, no one said anything about the blacks, but I'm starting to question it.
No. Look at the societies that Christians build. Look at the things they build. In Catholic theology, there's a thing called the transcendentals, and it's supposedly the things that all souls have in common, that all people yearn for, and which brings us closer to an understanding of God. Now, opinions differ on how many of these things there are, but the core three that everyone agrees on is beauty, truth, and goodness. And it seems to me that if you look at the frescoes in Italy, or you listen to German composers, or look at Dutch painting,
I mean, the whole point is to say that this is present in all souls, whether they're Catholics or not, by the way.
That we, in Western Christian Europe, have done a pretty good job of embracing beauty, truth, and goodness, and also...
I'm a very big proponent of beauty, truth, and goodness. So, like, this is like, and I do think they are one thing.
Sacrifice, and sacrifice for love, which is the central image of Christianity. Feuerbach, the philosopher who was not a Christian, did not like Christians at all, said that, you can sort of tell what a culture's all about from its religion's kind of central symbol. Ours is Christ on the cross, dying for someone you love. It's Tristan and Isolde.
I mean, that's not Christian, that's Catholic. Not all Christians like that, right?
It's all the things that we think are most noble. It's sending people to war to die for their country. All of those values, all those...
I mean, I wouldn't say that is... like, sending people to war is not what I think of as the most noble. So, for example, I think the Russians sending their people to war right now is actually based in sin and evil. And that's why the Pope calls for an end to these conflicts and why we pray for peace in every Mass. So we don't see that as the most noble. We see dying for values, like to live for values and be willing to give our lives for them. Yeah. But I don't think that means like, I think that's not Christian. We're not like warmongers, for example.
Those things we love rest on the image of Christ on the cross. We are good only because we have learned goodness from Christianity. And we can insist in a prideful way that, oh, no, I'm good because I made myself good, because I got there through reason.
Yeah, I mean, you can't... I think that's fair. And I think that, that you would say that there is God-given reason, which is why everyone can come to the objective moral values despite not having a Christian upbringing. Which is why, you'll see a lot of metaphysical, epistemological, and ethical... mirroring between various religions, right? Like if we look towards, all Abrahamic religions obviously share something in common, but if we look towards Eastern religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, we'll see a lot of the same ethics in many ways. Sometimes they surpass it. They actually go a little bit ahead of it, because the way in which the the reasoning gives them an indication as to how to be more loving in certain instances, which is, another reason why we need to learn from others, and why like the church should be universal and engage with people of different and various rational, what would be the right word to use, sort of rationalities, really. So I'm not a perennialist here. All right, okay.
All right, mate. Just look at the societies that Christians build, and you tell me where you want to live.
I guess it's a little bit perennialism. Oh, broke it again. Sorry, guys. I'm terrible.
Abu Dhabi? Is it the Congo? Is it Sparta?
Sparta.
Or is it Western
based.
Europe? Maybe 50 years ago. I know where I'd rather be.
All right. Last question for Milo.
Who is this? You can tell he's a pussy when he's not willing to get involved in the agoge. If you don't see your ideal place as being trained in the agoge, this is how we are. This is how men should be. What have we become?
And you'll have 5 minutes to respond to this, and Destiny will have 3 minutes to respond to that. Some would argue that societies governed under one faith can devolve into tyranny. How would you prevent a Second Inquisition or a Soviet-style dictatorship with them forcing people to proclaim their allegiance to the state and faith?
Well, the Soviets are crap because they failed. I mean, they failed.
Oh yeah, that's why. It wasn't all the genocide and the evil. No, it's because they failed. Right? It's not the wrong. It's not the torture and murder, the sort of sickening ethic that was within the foundation of the Soviet Union. No, it's that they lost. That's what you don't understand.
To do what America has accomplished, which is have people thank you for their enslavement and ask for more chains. The Soviet Union never really achieved that, but America has, with prescription drugs and all the other things that people are addicted to. I mean, everybody in this room is dependent on a cocktail, a little package, a little consumer package of things that get them through.
That's projection right there. He is definitely on a cocktail or some packet, and he's picked the wrong. What he's done is he's picked the wrong point, right? He's on the down. And he needed to be on the up for this debate. Like that's the crack. He's just at the wrong point in the cycle.
Whether it's
like 3 o'clock in the morning that night, I bet he's thinking of some wild rebukes of Destiny's position.
Credit cards or gaming or whatever, passing your wife around. These are the things that sort of get you through life. I'm not terribly concerned about preventing another Inquisition. I think that'd be quite a good idea. Got a pretty bad rap, just like the Crusades does. I mean, you won't hear this from dishonest people who throw accusations at, without really listening to the arguments of their opponents.
I mean, the Crusades were awful in many ways. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I think that people misunderstand, especially the First Crusade. Especially the attacks on the Byzantine Empire, and I think that's largely made out like, Christians are evil. It was a very warfaring time in which the Byzantine Empire was essentially getting attacked by its like sort of Muslim neighbors, and it was losing, and it called upon Christendom for help. And really, only Christians didn't really help each other in Western Europe. It wasn't like a thing, but it was really only the sort of ambitious who responded, like from Italy. I think some people from Germany. I think maybe he's from Spain as well, but I'll have to double check. And it was like knights, and they went and took the Holy Land and all that. But a lot of them wanted to establish themselves as like lords in that area. So it wasn't like just out of purely like, okay, we care about our Christian neighbors or anything like that. And then the Second Crusade was like religious zealotry, a lot of it. And even during the First Crusade, they had the People's Crusade, and the People's Crusade was absolutely awful, where it was like stirred up from xenophobia. In which the about 150,000 like normal people went and tried to march on Jerusalem, and became like a proliferous band of vagabonds and delinquents, essentially in that destitution, because they're a ill-prepared army marching through Western Europe, became incapable of feeding itself, and so essentially raided other European towns. And this was after about 3,000 Jews were killed in Germany at the time because of a kind of anti-Semitism that was stirred up. And then when they eventually got to the sort of borders of the Byzantine Empire, they were ambushed and killed. So this is it wasn't a good time. It wasn't a good time. No, for no one.
Opponents and who aren't educated prior to 1980, but the Crusades were a defensive war. The Inquisition.
The First Crusade was a defensive war, right? The second, third, fourth, and fifth have their own unique histories.
Wasn't all that it's been said to be.
It's not as clear cut, I will say, as like Christians bad, Muslims good. But
I don't have an enormous problem with us wandering around and making sure people aren't murdering each other in the womb and making sitting back and making money off the poor, landlords in Brooklyn. I don't have a terrible problem with that. I don't think that protecting against tyranny is the thing that America should be most concerned with at the moment. I think
that was like the most un-American thing he could have said. Like, he cannot be trying to convince conservatives that they shouldn't be protected against tyranny. Like, these are the people. Like know your audience here, Milo. These people are constantly afraid of the government. Like what he should have said is that what we need to do is fight the tyranny of this liberal agenda. And he would have got a fucking standing ovation in Tennessee, right? But instead, he's framed this as, we don't need to care about tyranny. Which is like, no, man, you need to know where you are.
An urgent, strict, and perhaps stern realignment to a much more conventional morality would make everybody happier. And I don't think that anyone in this room can honestly say that America is better now than it was when most people were going to church or at least God-fearing. It isn't better. And you don't have to be.
I mean, there are some things that are better, like the civil rights movement having succeeded. That's largely a good thing. Like there are things in the United States that are better. The rise of veganism, like that's a really good thing. It's not clear cut of whether like Christian or not means good or bad, right?
Be a Christian to participate in a Christian society. Christians are the best of all at letting people in, sometimes too much. Sometimes the people that come in end up messing everything up. You don't have to be a Christian to benefit from a Christian society, and lots of people in this room.
But this guy said that you should mandate Christianity, right? Which means you're not going to let them in unless they're Christian, unless they're willing to convert. Like,
have done exactly that.
Like, you're not arguing for like what Christians have done or what Christians do. You're arguing for like a new brand of Christian nationalism.
But when you take God out and things start to fall apart, you end up in a world nobody wants to live in. And we are in. Sorry?
What year? You're referring to a traditional Christianity. What year are you referring to?
What do you mean?
Like you're referring to a traditional Christianity.
Oh, well, I mean, if I had my way, I'd go back to about 1200. Lots of propagandists in university departments call it the Dark Ages. This is a conversation for another day, really. But it seems to me it was quite a nice time to live, and I think.
I mean, it really wasn't. It really, really wasn't a nice time to live. I mean, like even the fact that Christians were hell bent on murdering each other in terms of various competing nations at the time.
I think that you would find. If you care about this kind of thing, if you do care about things...
Yeah, the 1200s on the Dark Ages, that's like bang in the medieval... Actually, it's the late medieval. It's late medieval. The Dark Ages, I'd probably be like... It's kind of like... Is it taken from like 300 to maybe like... Actually, no, because early medieval, it depends on where you take it. Actually, when did the Dark Ages, in terms of... Certainly not, like... we're starting to get like mid... It's probably mid-medieval in the 1200s. Late medieval, what, like 1400s, then we start to hit Renaissance. Is that about right? Trying to remember like the beginning and end. 15th, 16th century, yeah, for Renaissance. So like, what was it like? Yeah, like say like the Dark Ages. I don't know, like early Middle Ages. Yeah, so we're like what, maybe like 300 to like 1000, maybe 900 AD. And then mid to late medievals that we're talking about here.
Above and beyond yourself. If you care about where we go afterwards, if you care about leaving a good legacy, if you care about being good to the people around you, I think a lot more people in 1400 got into heaven each year.
No, 500 to 1,500. No, that's far too. That's a much too big. That's just that's the medievals. Like, you're not even. That's not even. I think that's just like the Middle Ages, really. That you're sort of branding as the Dark Ages. Their rules. Like that's not the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages are like really like the fall of Rome, up to the point of the establishment of essentially like sort of feudal Christian states. Like. Not really. So no, not really. So more like like 470 to 800. I would say like even 300 to 8. Yeah, like less than grey. I think that's probably about right. Like 300 to 800 really is kind of like the Dark Ages.
Than do now. And I don't think you have to be a Christian to accept that that's because we're not nice anymore, and we're not good to each other, and the reason for that is the failing moral architecture and underpinning of society.
I mean, we have problems. Like, he's genuinely right in saying there are problems, but then, like, we're in a much better ethical situation. Like, ethics has progressed a considerable amount since the 1200s, man.
Which was required by the founders, or this stuff doesn't function. It's not.
All right, Destiny, you have 3 minutes to respond.
Can you hit me up with that prompt again?
Some would argue that societies governed under one faith can devolve into tyranny. How would you prevent a second Inquisition or a Soviet-style dictatorship where people have to proclaim their allegiance to the state and faith?
I mean, I will say, like, these questions are really only geared towards Milo. Nothing about this challenges, or the question prior to this challenges Destiny's position. So I do hope that the like, you know, if the political moderator in this debate actually starts doing that job a bit better and starts probing Destiny's position, because I would like to actually hear Destiny's position, because right now he's got this easy win and he's just sort of riding the wave.
I mean, it's kind of a hard question for me to answer because I'm not advocating for Christian nationalism.
You say, like, even he's saying, like, why would I? Like, you know, it doesn't fit, like, what he's arguing for.
I would say, obviously, we should be allowed to carry on as we are now, where everybody's allowed to choose what God they want to worship, choose the lifestyle they want
How would I do anything about that? I would be a liberal, you know.
to live, as long as they're not encroaching on the freedoms of other people. I think you should continue to have the right to do that. So it's my argument in the negative. Also, I do think it's kind of funny that Milo pointed out that everybody in here is addicted to consumerist packaging, when I'm pretty sure that bag is worth like 10 times more than my entire outfit.
It is. It is.
All right, now we will do the last question for you, Destiny, and then we'll go to the Q&A/crossfire. Some would argue that most people are naturally drawn to some sort of faith or belief in a higher power. How would you prevent your society from inevitably becoming a religious society and thus being run by the exact same organizing faith or ideas that you want to stop?
I mean, I think there is a better question to be built from that. And I think that what he should have said was, rather than like, how do you stop your society becoming inherently religious? How do you stop essentially dogmatism and ideological, like how do you prevent dogmatism and sort of a blind ideological subscription from leading to a society which restricts freedoms in the way in which you are advocating against? Then that would have been more interesting, because it's not about religion, right? I mean, like in the specifically the sense of like a sort of theological perspective where it's about God, or it's about some sort of spiritual higher belief, but more of an ideological, like you could have something like communism, or like in the way in which like Marxist-Leninists would advocate for becoming a danger. I doubt it ever would in America, but becoming a danger in the United States. Or you could have something like radical liberalism, or like, you could have libertarianism and like the alt-right, fascism. I think is probably the biggest danger for the United States to fall into. Probably closer to the Christian nationalism, I guess, in some respects that Milo's arguing for. And the fascism's probably the real threat there. And it doesn't have to be organized around Christianity or some sort of religious belief, but it could genuinely pop up in terms of how, what happens when people start, the open society and its enemies. You know what I mean? Like what happens when the intolerant use your mechanisms of tolerance against you. That, I think, is the question that needed to be addressed. But let's see how this goes.
I think that the important thing is for people to have something bigger than themselves to live for. I don't think it has to be religion, but if it was religion, I don't necessarily think that's the worst thing in the world. I think that the defining aspect of the United States is that a lot of people with contradictory ideas can exist within the same geographic borders, governed by the same legal system, voting on the same politicians, and somehow finding a way to make all of that work. I think we've done it for hundreds of years. I think we do it better than any other country on the planet.
So, like, just somehow. And why does he think that they're doing this better than any other country on the planet? Like in terms of being more like politically tolerant? I'm not really sure. I think that the way that you've actually engaged, like the United States has engaged for hundreds of years, I wouldn't call it the most politically tolerant civilization. I think there are places in Europe specifically that I am very confident are more capable of running a well-mediated democracy than the United States. But that's not to say that like I think the United States is going to fall apart overnight or anything, right? But it would be nice to say like what the especially considering that places in the Europe were doing this while America was fighting a brutal civil war, which it kind of fights every election. I think McIntyre talks about how the lines of voting lines basically line up to civil war sort of outposts, if you will. So it's essentially the civil war continued through other means. So it's not a very well. It's not like you've overcome your problems there. But yeah, like I think don't get me wrong. I think the United States is like it's a democracy. It's kind of functional. It functions largely in ways that are undemocratic. Like the lobbying that exists that needs to be addressed. And the sort of manipulations of like votership through propaganda and coercion. I think largely are sort of issues that needs to be addressed, and not just in the United States, but in democracy in general. And I think it would have been nice for him to talk about those things, where it would have meant even just sort of like give a little tip of the hat, if you will, to the genuine issues that democracy faces, especially in a time when you've got foreign coercion or foreign collusion becoming a greater and greater threat, even in terms of the propaganda that they produce in order to create divisions, which is like Kremlin documents that were leaked, showing that they wanted Donald Trump to become president and promote Donald Trump in terms of propaganda in order just to create more divisions in the United States. The same thing, it's when they funded Brexit to get us out of Europe, to create more divisions in our societies. And we're being like, clearly it somewhat works, right? And a lot of people, demagogues, if you will, play into these issues. So it would have been nice for him to touch on these things. But like even if you do think lobbying is fine, there's clearly a debate on this, right? Like, so like they need to be sort of addressed. That like it's not that the United States can just continue the way it is or has gone in a time which is changing. Like if he's said himself, we're not going to stop using the internet. We're not putting the genie back in the bottle. Well, okay, but we need to address with the situation in the here and now, and the divisions within the United States are cripplingly high. So, how are you planning on addressing this?
right now, today, not before 1980, not in the 1200s, but today in 2023, I think we have an incredibly diverse country of people, all sorts of creeds, all sorts of ethnicities, all sorts of different types of people that seem to be living together and making it work. I think we have problems right now, like I mentioned earlier, with the political division. And I think that that's a real problem that we need to combat, but I think we need to do it by having honest conversations about what we can do to move forward, not by talking to people that want to look back.
Yeah, but it's like just having the conversations aren't going to help, because the problem is that people do converse, but it becomes a slang and match and an argument very quickly. Like, just saying, like, if someone says, like, look, I think that this promotion of the LGBT agenda is inherently unethical because it's preventing people from seeking salvation, right? From a very Protestant, like, sort of dogmatic ethic. And then you've got the other side saying, well, actually, I think that your promotion of like your pro-life position is inherently unethical because it breaches women's rights. Then how do we mediate this conversation? Like, just having an open, honest conversation is not enough. You need to be able to say, like, it's not just, don't get me wrong, I think that is a fundamental component in it. And I'm not saying that he's wrong and saying that that needs to happen. But the need to start philosophically looking towards points of mediation where they can, like, go back. They do need to go back and address, why do I believe what I believe? What should I believe? How do I understand what is right and wrong? And approach this in terms of reason, and rather than like partisanship, rather than hegemony. So that's what that's what needs to happen. It can't just be, we're going to talk. We're just going to talk it over.
Hundreds or thousands of years to what society used to look like before there was Gucci and hairdressers.
I could live without both if it meant that you would be left on a mountainside somewhere, your parents wondering which god they'd pissed off, which is exactly what would have happened in a pre-Christian civilization to something like you.
Probably would have left the...
Whoa! Why is he just constantly making this personal? I'll give Destiny's credit. He's not even really slapping back. He's actually, like, holding himself all right in such a way, because, like, I mean, this guy's done loads of nasty shit so far.
Gays there before people like me.
Well, I don't think you can tell when it pops out whether it's going to, like, cock or not. Maybe if it's your kid, but...
Why is he even... Why are you bringing up his kid, man? Like, that's just not cool. Like, why is he... Like, very Christian of you. You know, essentially, like, using homophobic slurs against a child. Like, that's so fucking weird.
I'm sure you'll ensure that's the case.
I mean, you know all about kids liking, huh? Isn't that...
Would I? Tell us more about that. Would I? Because that's a pretty big allegation. Would I?
Would you what?
Would I know about that?
Well, seems like it. Isn't that what you got canceled for?
No, I got cancelled for talking about the fact that I was a victim of clerical sexual abuse.
So about, like, little boys liking, right?
I mean, no, I think that's wrong, right? You can't say, like he's sexual, like, that he was a little boy liking dick. That's fucked up, right? Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I get it. Like, he's been such a cunt to him this whole time, and Destiny's, like, firing back, but you can't really say that. Like, clearly, like, if the guy is a genuine victim of, like, someone's perversity here, you can't just go, like, right, yeah, but you like cock, you know what I mean? Like, you were a little boy who liked cock. That's fucked up.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, yeah, I mean...
You got the revenge.
Then again, he defended it himself, right? Like, so, at the same time, like...
Actually, it's okay.
Okay.
I can tell you're coming down right now, but I'll walk you through the rest of my jokes if you need me to.
No, I fair enough. Okay, are you bringing it? Fine. It's a shame Father Michael's dead. He would have liked that. I think if... I don't know that it makes me an expert on kids liking being raised by a priest, but if you want some comedy lessons afterwards, I'm happy to give you 20 minutes.
I mean, like, to be fair, I do think that's fucked up. Like, I do think that's fucked up, and Destiny shouldn't have said it. But I'm not standing in judgment of Destiny just because, like, Destiny's just sort of firing back. That's the crack. But he is wrong, fundamentally wrong, to imply that he was, that he did actually enjoy it. And yeah, I know he did. I know what Milo argued for on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he deserved to have rebuke for that. But that's from the perspective of a victim of abuse, and they often try to reframe it as them not being themselves being the victim. But like, I think that like him claiming now that it was rape, I think that shows progress. And don't get me wrong, I don't say Destiny's being a bad guy here. I think that he's only reacting. But he is wrong in saying that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not like Destiny is the worst for saying it. He's just slapping back. But he is wrong. It is wrong.
What was the question? Sorry, I was so bored.
The question was, some would argue that most people are naturally drawn to some sort of faith or belief in a higher power. How would you, Destiny, prevent your society?
Yeah, it's like the worst way to fire back. Like, it was the most provocative way to fire back. Really, that's
From inevitably becoming a religious society and thus being run by the same organizing faith ideas.
I think it's a bit lazy to say, as people often do, that we now have a kind of alternate sort of progressive religion. I don't think that progressivism really functions like a religion. It's true that when you take God out of things, you don't just sort of, get rid of him.
I agree. Like, obviously him talking about his wife and kids really just made it like no holds barred. I'm not, as I said, I'm not standing in judgment of Destiny here. Like, I'm not like, oh, I can't believe he said that, that's appalling, blah, blah, blah. It's just to point out what he said was wrong, right? Like, obviously, like, he's hitting them where it hurts. I think, what comedian was it? Like, Ed Byrne, who was like, if we're in an argument, and he's like, I will say the nastiest, meanest thing I can. And he's like, that's just the way it's going down. He's like, if you've got one leg, I'm bringing up the leg, And I think that's what's going on, yeah.
In the same way that when you get rid of a king, you don't really get rid of the king. You still are ruled by people that you have no power over. The difference is that in America, you don't know their names, because they lurk behind that flag, rubbing their hands and making money off you and getting you addicted to things. You don't know their names, so you can't assassinate them. One reason monarchy is better.
Is it? I mean, if we look towards Russia right now, they kind of have a monarch, and you can't assassinate him either.
I think... Sorry, I forgot the question.
Of course you did.
Oh, it was about how do you prevent it from sliding in? Yeah, I think it's lazy when people say, "Oh, we've replaced kind of one religion with a progressive religion." It's true that when God moves out, that other things move in. You don't just kind of get rid of it and now everyone's happy and now everyone can just be nice to each other. That yearning that you've acknowledged that we all have has got to be satisfied by something. So if you take the Christian God out, something worse moves in, because there isn't anything better than that. There isn't anything better than that for organizing society. There isn't anything better than that for teaching people how to behave to one another. There isn't anything better than that objectively.
I mean, obviously, I kind of agree with that. Like, obviously, I do think the Christian God is the greatest, but it's how people view the Christian God. Like, not all Christians agree on what God is, how he acts, what he expects of us. So I think this is a kind of cheap, like, it's very cheap to say, like, well, no, our God is perfect, and therefore our religion is perfect, and our society would be perfect. It doesn't seem to how it works out, right? Like, even amongst Christians, they can all believe in the same God, and yet have a massive swath of different ethical stances, and to the point where some are absolutely abhorrent, and others far more are saintly,
practically and empirically. So things do move in, but progressivism of the type that he likes doesn't function like a religion, because all religions have one thing in common that his political orthodoxy doesn't, and that's salvation and forgiveness, because there is no forgiveness for people who are cancelled, whether or not they were responsible for what happened to them and we're trying to make sense of an abuse experience, or whether...
I think that's legitimate. Like, I genuinely think that's the only thing that Milo's said so far that I think rings of truth. That, and this is what he really should have done, is just made a video like, look, I'm sorry for what I said. I am a victim of abuse. I couldn't see myself. I couldn't come to terms with myself as a victim of abuse. And so I said those really stupid, naive things in order to cope. I'm really sorry if I've harmed or put anyone else in danger. I really didn't intend for that. That would have been, I think, what he should have done And instead, we've got this. Yeah.
They said something that they shouldn't have said. There's no way back. There's no forgiveness. There's no redemption. And that's the thing that all religions, except for this orthodoxy, seem to have in common. So I don't think it's. I think it's a bit lazy to say that one religion gets replaced by another. But it is definitely true that you cannot simply chop off the top of the pyramid and expect.
I mean, like, why would you say that his psychological coping mechanism wasn't his authentic views, right? Like, it's not that his authentic views are not the coping mechanism. It's that they exist as his authentic views because it's a cope. Like, we'll say, like, for example, there was a woman who was gang raped. I think it was in Manchester or London. I'll have to double check. And she was gang raped. It was like drugged and gang raped, and then went back. And with the intention of essentially giving herself over in order to make herself feel like this was her choice, that she wanted it. It wasn't forced upon her. And then they didn't like that, so they essentially beat her, like, much more viciously. Like, that's the kind of truth behind victimhood. Is that, like, victims don't really often want to see themselves as victims or become incapable of seeing themselves as victims. Sometimes victims see themselves as perpetrators. Sometimes victims see themselves as the instigators, as the cause. Certainly not as victims necessarily. It can really mess with your head. That's the real impact of trauma. So I do think that if you're defining these authentic views as not being the traumatic experience, then I think obviously then authenticity is rational. And that's how we're defining it. And we're saying, like, his rational views are his authentic views and his irrational views are not his views. Like, they are the sort of imparted from the traumatic experience itself. And that's how we would distinguish them. But then, like, obviously that leaves no real clear metric of where Milo begins and where Milo ends in terms of his volition of what he's saying. And I think that when we look at it, he is authoring himself in relation to a reason. It's just a not complete reason. He's doing it incorrectly. A lot of what's coming through isn't Milo, and that can be seen through the irrational. But that doesn't mean that he wasn't the one saying it and he wasn't the one meaning it. It just shows that it just shows the true impact of the trauma.
Everything to be fine. Something worse will slither its way up there, and it has.
Thank you guys so much. Let's give everybody, both of them, a round of applause, please.
Oh, come on, you can't applause that. That was the worst. This is the problem with America today. They'll just clap when they're told to.
Now we're going to move into the audience Q&A. So if you'd like to ask a question, line up behind me. We'll have somebody hold a mic here, and you're allowed to ask one question. And we'll have probably about 30 minutes this. If we want to go a little longer, we can, but we'll try to keep it to 30 minutes.
Got to be powderful.
Damn me. It's with Milo being like such a diva and Destiny having blue hair. That's why there's hair adverts. Destiny powdered his hair, I can tell. Yeah, Milo doesn't deserve an applause. I think his shown was awful. Like, genuinely terrible. Like, genuinely terrible there. And I think Destiny, I think, made a much better showing. But I guess he didn't have much pushback. The questions weren't suited to his position. He didn't really have to say very much. And he didn't volunteer too much either, which I think is a bit of a problem. But otherwise, I think Destiny did all right. But